That there is partridge berry, also goes by several other names, including squawberry. It is one of our wild edibles. Both the leaves and the berries are edible. Fun little plant to be aware of. Get some good vitamins in there if you're foraging. Hey friends, welcome back to Prepping with Sarge. I hope you are having a great 30 days of preparedness. It is National Preparedness Month. This is another video is part of the collaboration for 30 days of preparedness. Please check down in the description down below. I have linked all of the collaborators in this, and special shout out to Morgan from Rogue Preparedness, who spearheaded this and got everybody involved. All right, let's get to today's topic. So today we're going to be talking about survival foraging and why this is a skill that I think all preppers should learn. I'm going to show you a couple different plants that are some of my favorites in my area, and I'm going to give you some tips to get you started. Stay with me now. All right, now this beauty here is called Yaupon from the holly family, and I want you to take a good close look at those leaves, and I'm going to show you the bark as well, because that makes this one super easy to identify. Now this is found in the southern states from the East Coast all the way to Texas, and maybe spreading a little bit further north. This is the only native source of caffeine in the United States. So what you do, I've done several videos on this. We'll go ahead and put a link up to there to at least one of those on how to make a caffeinated beverage out of this. It's a really nice plant to be aware of. So take a look at those nice dark green leaves. I'll show you the underside of the leaves, which have a little bit more of a dull silvery finish to them, and those serrations, and take a look at the structure there of the leaves, right? This is how you want to learn to identify them. You want to be able to know them by sight. So I don't always, bring my books with me and things like that. We're going to talk about that here in just a second, but whoa. Sorry about that. I had a giant wolf spider crawl across my foot there. It just kind of caught me off guard. All right, so let's take a look at just one of those occupational hazards when you're foraging. So let's take a look at this leaf structure, and I really want to show you the bark here. Now the bark on the Yaupon holly has like this greenish gray. It's fairly smooth to the touch, almost looks like a moldy green color. And I've seen these grow as large as 15 feet. This one here is about 6 feet or so, maybe a little bit over 6 feet. But I've seen them grow as large as 15 feet. And actually right next to it is another wild edible as well. It's smilax. I don't know if I'm going to talk about that one in this particular video, but I've talked about it in some of the other ones. But this is Yaupon. Basically what you're going to do is you're going to dry out these leaves. And as one of my teachers taught me, you're going to dry out these leaves, and it's better to let them dry naturally if you can. It will retain more of the caffeine content in there. And then basically you're going to put them in your tea. You can crush them up, or you can get like one of those little stainless steel tea balls. I'll try to link one of those in the description as well if you want to check that out. It's kind of a neat piece of kit to keep in your prepper pantry. And basically you're going to steep it for about 8 to 10 minutes, and you get a nice little caffeinated tea. Now the energy boost that you're going to get off this one is a little bit more subtle than coffee. It's not going to hit you as quickly and as hard as coffee will. It's a little more of a slow climb in energy, which is actually a little bit better for your brain. One caution with this one is don't go too crazy with like, a couple, 1 or 2 cups of tea of this kind a day is probably more than enough. I wouldn't go more than that, because some people do get some GI issues with this one if they drink too much of it. It's just one of those things you're going to have to try in small quantities and see how your body responds. But I like it a lot. It's got a nice green tea flavor with it. I've never had the GI issues with it myself, but I never drink more than 1 cup of this per day. All right, so how are you going to learn foraging? So my number 1 tip is don't try to learn foraging from one of those plant ID apps. Now, I have amended my position on that. Let me talk about that in just a second. The best way to learn foraging, in my opinion, is to train from somebody who has more experience than you do, okay? So that can be a professional botanist, that can be somebody who has been very, very active in the field and has written books and guides about that. 3 people that I have personally trained with that I highly recommend, and it is worth traveling to get to one of their classes, is Dr. Mark Merriweather Vorderbruggen, who is in Texas, although he travels around and is a lot of time, like he'll be at Georgia Bushcraft probably doing one of his foraging classes there. Here in Charleston, we have April Punselin from Wild Herb Academy. She is fantastic, one of the best foraging instructors in the world. You can follow her on Instagram as well. And also in Georgia, we have forager chick who's been on my channel a couple times as well. Probably will be teaching at Georgia Bushcraft again. So yeah, find the foraging instructor that you want to train with, and it is absolutely worth spending the money to travel to them and catching a class with them. Now, the next recommendation would be to go ahead and get yourself some good books. I'm going to link at least one in the description down below from Dr. Mark Meriwether of Vorderbruggen, and much better than using some kind of app or things like that. So finally, I did promise you I'd give you my feelings on the apps. Now, I used to be very much against those apps. Here's what I'm going to say now. I've amended my position on this. If you want to use an app to get you started, that's okay. If you want to use it as one of your ways to try to just narrow down what am I looking at, I think that's okay. But I would not, absolutely, listen to me carefully now, I would not recommend that you make any kind of choice about what to put in your body based solely on an app. They're just not reliable enough. I have personally experimented with these and found that they make many mistakes. There's a lot of species that look so close together that the AI just doesn't have the ability to distinguish them. Maybe over time that will get better, but right now they're just not as reliable, and they're really not reliable for mushrooms. Okay, so you really got to be careful. Please, if you're watching this, please don't use an app as your only way to identify. You're going to make a big mistake at some point, and you're going to be very sorry. You're either going to get very sick, or something worse. You could die, you could get liver failure. There's all kinds of bad things that could happen. Not trying to scare you off of foraging, I just want you to do it the right way. All right, Carolina pony's foot. If you live in the southeast US, you should be able to find this one. Pretty easy to identify. It's got like a pony's horseshoe kind of shape there on the leaf. This is actually another fun little wild edible just to be aware of if you live my part of the world. Carolina pony's foot. Take a look at that one. Grapevines you should be able to find in most parts of the United States, except for maybe desert areas. Here you have some wild grapes, and obviously they're much smaller than the kind you get in the store, probably a little bit more tart as well. I believe these are fox grapes. I'd have to do a little bit more research to give you 100% on that one. But usually with grape leaves, the leaves themselves are edible, and of course the grapes are edible. The problem with this, as you can see, is the wildlife tends to get to it before we do. So you got to be kind of quick. Know your spots that have this, and be ready to grab them when they're ripe. A little banana spider there, just gonna say hello. They're generally not harmful to humans. They're actually kind of friendly. They are big though. That one is about the size of, just to give you my hand in the picture, give you some perspective. They're pretty big, but as long as you don't touch them, they won't hurt you. They're pretty friendly, and they're actually good for the environment. So back to these grapes here for just a second. So one other tip I got is that learn a couple plants at a time, right? It can be overwhelming to try to memorize. I mean, look at all the biodiversity here. Do I know all these plants? No. I have, in terms of wild and medicinal plants, I have about somewhere between 50 and 75 that I can recognize on site, memorized, and they're specific to my area or the East Coast, places that I'm usually in. So start with 5, memorize 5 and learn them, and learn about like what are the compounds in them, how to recognize it by the leaf, the bark, the fruit, the flower, and what time of year does it bloom, what habitat are you likely to find them at, and just kind of go up from there. When you've got 5 that you can spot and you can say 100% every time that you know what that is, then you're ready to go on to the next 5 and go for 10 and go for 15. And pretty soon you'll find that you've got a good amount of wild edibles in your area memorized. Folks, if you're getting anything of value out of this, please consider giving me a thumbs up. And if you're new to the channel, please consider subscribing. And don't forget to check down in that description down below for links and all of the channels that are participating in the 30 Days of Preparedness. So 2 more tips that I want to add in, and then I'm going to show you one more wild edible here. So my friend April Punseland says to pay attention to the plants that call out to you. And that is good advice. In permaculture, it's said a different way. I think that the expression is something about like pay attention to the anomaly, and that's actually served me pretty well as I've been learning about foraging myself, just basically trying to figure out, why is a plant sticking out in my vision or sense of smell, right? And a lot of times those ones do turn out to be medicinal and edible. It's not like 100% something that you can rely on, but it starts you on a process. You find a new plant and you say, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'd like to research that one a little bit more. And that's what you need to do. You need to research all this stuff in advance and really be sure, 100% sure actually, before you eat something that you find outside, okay? Now, another tip I want to make you to be aware of is that in permaculture, there's an expression called abundance exists at the edges. What does that mean? Well, it means that where two ecosystems meet, there's an abundance of biodiversity. And this is true anywhere on the planet, right? If you can find two different ecosystems where they're connecting, in that area, there's going to be an abundance of biodiversity, right? And that can be where the desert starts to change. It can be where a pond meets the land. It can be where the mountain meets the prairie. But wherever two ecosystems are connecting, that's where you're going to find an abundance of biodiversity, not just for plants, but also for animals. So if you're a hunter or fisher, you might be thinking about like, okay, where am I most likely to find a lot of animals? And they are going to be attracted to water. Look at all those birds in that tree right there, right? Just something to keep in mind when you're learning foraging. Abundance exists at the edges. Folks, if you've been watching me for a while, you know what this one is. That is another one of my absolute personal favorites. That is beautyberry. And what a gorgeous plant this is. Now, absolutely, these berries are edible. The leaves are not. Please be careful with this one. You don't want to eat the leaves. You can take these leaves and crush them up and make a poultice, rub it on your skin, and it's a natural insect repellent. So the leaves actually do have a nice purpose, but those berries are edible, and it is absolutely gorgeous. You gotta love this one. That is American beautyberry. And folks, if you're enjoying this video, if you think you'd like to learn more about foraging, I have over 100 videos in my foraging playlist. Definitely check that out. I will show you some of the plants that I know. Some of them are from my area here in South Carolina, but I've also done quite a bit of traveling. So there's some desert foraging videos in there. There's some foraging from up in Massachusetts. I think I have some from Georgia in there. So definitely check out that playlist. It's a good place to get started. All right, friends, before we wrap this one up, I want to give you 2 suggestions for some resources or some tools that you might want to grab. This is one of the foraging books that I have in my library I really like. That's from our friend, Dr. Mark Merriweather Vorderbruggen. And as you can see, he personalized my copy when I saw him at Georgia Bushcraft. This is a great foraging guide. Really encourage you to check this one out. It shows you like where to find them and different lookalikes to be aware of. There's pony's foot that we talked about earlier. And near the back, there's some recipes, right? Really cool book. This is one of the ones. I'll link it in the description for you to check out. And there's great information near the back about plant identification, the different leaf types, things like that. So check this one out. I'll put a link for that in the description. And this is the Wazoo Survival Gear foraging bandana. Dr. Mark Merriweather actually helped design this with Dr. Nicole Apalayan from Alone. And this is a really cool, it's got basically a key in the middle, shows you some of the most common foraging plants and mushrooms that you can find in the United States and different ways that you can use them, what parts of the plant are edible. Really cool tool. I always have this with me when I'm hiking. And then underneath it, if you get the bandana net, which I recommend, it actually has a mosquito screen foraging, like basically a pouch. So you can put stuff in there, mushrooms and wild lettuce, things like that, and it won't wilt because it's breathing properly. So this is a piece of kit that's always on me when I'm hiking. Folks, if you found this video helpful, don't forget to drop a like in there. And don't forget to check the description for links to all the other collaborators in the 30 Days of Preparedness collaboration. Keep planting your seeds, keep stacking your silver. This is Prepping with Sarge.